All right, guys, it's your homeboy here, Bullish Money. I want to talk about the pharmaceutical industry and specifically why it is that race matters. I've noticed in society that, in American society, that we're getting into this, there's this movement about let's not identify people by race anymore, that we're all Americans, and so we don't have to have these hyphens like white American or black American or Asian American, Hispanic American, whatever. We don't have to have these hyphens. We can just call ourselves Americans. And it sounds really good on paper, right? It sounds like, oh yeah, this is all about unity. We live in a particularly divisive political period, and so it'll be nice to hear this sort of unifying message. And I believe, as great as it sounds, it is all a psyop. It is to get us to think that we are all actually the same, so that they could prescribe the same pharmaceutical treatments, for instance. And I think race really is important because the pharmaceutical industry only caters to white Europeans. And I know that sounds like an anti-reverse racist thing to say, but it's true. I mean, when you look at the pharmaceutical companies, they're basically owned mostly by Americans or Western Western elites, Western powers, and therefore, obviously, they're going to concoct formulations that are specific to their people, which of course are white Europeans. So I'm not trying to say that. I'm not saying that that's a. I'm not trying to make a moral statement here. Okay, I'm not trying to say that pharmaceutical companies are racist. I'm not saying that at all. I think pharmaceutical companies actually hate everybody, but the treatments that work, supposedly, they're catered to white people, okay? And so, and the pharmaceutical companies assume white people's tolerances to certain substances or exposure to certain elements. Because let's face it, white folks are different from other folks, like black folks, Asian folks, whatever. They have certain tolerances that other races may not have. And so when you take a pharmaceutical, especially if you're not white European, you may be hurting yourself a lot more than helping yourself. For instance, you may know a lot of white people have benefited from chemotherapy, and therefore you think, well, as a non-white, because we're all the same, we're getting rid of our hyphens, that I should have the same benefits from chemotherapy as my white friends. And that's just not true, because white people are just different, right? We're all different. That's the thing about race, is that, yes, it's people just think about the skin color. It's not just the skin color. There are, again, you can just look at the evidence, the medical evidence that we, as a human race, as the collective diverse communities, that each community, each ethnic community or racial community, they all have different tolerances, and just it's not. When I say difference, I'm not talking about these marked, dramatic differences, but there are differences. And so what works for white people in general may not work for black people, may not work for Asian people. And so that's why I'm worried about this whole racial unity movement, because I think it's a psyop. I think it's a psyop conducted by, or at least funded by, in part, the pharmaceutical industry, to get us to all believe that we're all the same, that we can all take their pharmaceutical products, we can all take the same vaccines and have all the same results. And that's just not true. I mean, if the pharmaceutical companies mostly are owned by white people, guess who the benefits are for? It's not for Asian people, it's not for black people, it's for white people. And so I'm very concerned about this societal movement to get us into believing that we're all the same, because unfortunately we're not all the same. Unfortunately, that means that what may work for white folks isn't going to work for me, isn't going to work for anyone that's not white. And that's just the warning that I want to give, I want to provide in terms of the pharmaceutical industry and its relationship with race.